The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Mannin Line today looks at the airport. Director of the airport, Gary Cobb, is on. If you want to get in touch, text, email, call on WhatsApp. If we can get to the bottom of exactly where we are with the airport, where we are with the airlines, so anything you want to talk about, then by all means, raise them with the man in charge. He's been with us now for a little over a year, so let's see what's been happening. Hello, Faster Mike. Good afternoon, Gary Cobb. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Andy. Thank you very much for having me.
Jolly good. Now, was it August last year?
Yeah, August last year. So just over a year.
So can you sum up the past 14, 15 odd months?
Yeah, so quite a lot of activity at the airport. So I think, as I said last time, there was some regulatory issues in terms of safety, which we're making good progress on. In terms of airlines, again, it's just trying to consolidate and get some stability back into some of the routes, and then trying to create a plan for the future in terms of what kind of airport do we want to be, and then any funding that is required for that going forward. So busy.
In terms of the regulatory, now, what was the wording? What sort of sanction was the airport under last time?
So, in terms of we were in enhanced oversight, so more checks by the CAA. I think a lot of people can take quite a lot of worry from enhanced oversight. The way that aviation does it is you go into enhanced oversight if safety is about to be degraded. It's not you get unsafe and then the regulator comes in. It's if you start to look like you could be in the process of getting unsafe. So that was some of the work that we've done. We've done quite a lot of work, both with the regulator, both with the teams in terms of culture, safety management system, and to be fair, one of the big reasons that we were originally in trouble was a lack of an accountable manager, which is me.
Just get this straight. You mentioned CAA for the Uninitiated Civil Aviation Authority. Now, there are two, presumably. There's one on the Isle of Man, and then there's the UK one. Which one sits where?
So our CAA, so the Isle of Man CAA, is the competent authority for the Isle of Man. They have responsibility for safety, security, and all of the other issues that can arise. They do outsource some of their inspection to the UKCA, which are experts in doing that, and they have quite a big team in order to do it. So all primacy goes to the Isle of Man CAA, the only difference being the ATCO's licences, so the licences that our air traffic controllers have are UK licences. So in terms of the unit training, the requirements placed upon the unit in terms of training and holding a licence, that is overseen by the UK CAA. However, very closely watched by the Isle of Man CAA as well.
And it's worth restating that the CAA has ultimate sanction on the operation of the airport.
Yes, so ultimately, if safety degrades to a point where they think that it could be unsafe, then they can either go into direction, which is they take over the running of the airport, or they can close.
Okay, let's get to the lines, and first of all, we got David with us now. Hi, David, you're live with Gary Cobb.
Hi, Andy. Good afternoon, Mr. Cobb. I've lived on the Isle of Man for over 40 years, serving as Managing Director of an Isle of Man-based international business. So in that capacity, I flew on and off the Isle of Man every week over that period. And I have to confirm to you that I've never experienced the operational status of the Isle of Man airport that we've had this year due to air traffic issues. Twice in the last 3 weeks, my Sunday evening flight up from Gatwick has been cancelled, but I can provide very directly because the flight just 2 days ago. My wife and I were passengers on this flight. We arrived and were told the flight may be about 20 minutes late. And, of course, as we now know, it was cancelled due to the Isle of Man air traffic control curfew. The word curfew is not my word. It's the pilot's words when he made the announcement to the passengers. The flight was due to depart London Gatwick in 1915. We were told to be 20 minutes late. We were on board and buttoned down and ready to go at 1935. 138 passengers on board, including, obviously, in addition to those up here in the Isle of Man were waiting to fly back to Gatwick that evening. I happened to be sitting in row 1C, so I was in a good position to observe the flight deck communications. And it soon became clear that due to the curfew imposed by Isle of Man airports, the flight could get up, but it could not get back out again, and therefore would not fly. And the captain duly confirmed that to us and said that he confirmed the Isle of Man could operationally stay open. This is not due to staff shortages at that point, but that EasyJet was not willing to pay, his words, the fines and penalties imposed by Isle of Man airports in order to stay open for what would have been an extra 20 to 25 minutes. So we're all offloaded, and obviously the Isle of Man passengers up here in Ronaldsway looking to travel down were also inconvenienced. So hundreds of people were impacted by this. I chatted with one or two of the passengers. I talked to two board members of Isle of Man businesses who were coming up here for board meetings. Obviously, they never made it because the rescheduled flight went on Monday afternoon. We got back here about 16:30. So basically a day wasted. I didn't chat with all the passengers. What other businesses they were on, I don't know. Now, the Isle of Man has set itself up with three key objectives. One, to be an international business centre of excellence. Two, to attract an increasing number of leisure travellers. And three, to increase the population to 100,000. None of that is possible without reliable, scheduled airlinks. Mr. Cobb, I appreciate you've only been in post about a year, and I think the previous airport director left you a very bitter legacy because there's obviously been totally inadequate succession planning. My question to you is there now a quick fix for this terrible situation we find ourselves in, which has been going on all year, to create more flexible operations? EasyJet represent, 70-80% of the seats on and off the island. We are hugely dependent on them. And it can only be a question of time before they start reappraising their operations at the Isle of Man and wonder whether it is worth the costs they're incurring. Clearly, the fines and penalties are a big issue. If the Isle of Man was simply to suspend that fines and penalties regime for a period and maintain operational status for a little longer and give this airline a little more flexibility, would that be the short-term fix that we need?
I suppose in answer, no. So there's a lot of points to your question, which we could probably spend the next hour answering. So probably for the last 10 years, if not more, well before my time, the Isle of Man has always had a closing time of 8:45 at night. We can offer a summer extension to 9:30, and then anything after 9:30 is best endeavours and normally requires the overtime for air traffic control staff. And to be fair, probably well over 95% of the time, our air traffic controllers will stay behind. This isn't new to EasyJet. This has always been the case for EasyJet coming in. That flight always straddles very, very close to our closing time. And so then we will have to stay over. Stopping over happens on overtime. So again, it's not a fine or a penalty. We charge an extension fee, which is pretty much akin to every other UK airport that will offer an extension. And that extension is purely just covering the cost or the additional cost to the airport for stopping open. In terms of that, EasyJet know that flight is quite late, and they pay that extension fee on a regular basis for the Gatwick flight, which is regularly into the extension times. So in terms of waiving the extension fee, that wouldn't actually, I don't think, change anything, because ultimately that flight will still come in late. I have a lot of people who sit there and say, well, why don't we extend past 11 o'clock? I don't have the budget to extend past 11 o'clock. In terms of air traffic control and other parts of the airport, the requirements placed upon, in particular, air traffic controls for working past 11 o'clock changes the rule set again, and it becomes even more strict because naturally you would expect fatigue at night is harder. So budgets aside of having to go out and recruit a lot of additional people to be able to stay open past 11 o'clock is one side of the equation. The second side of the equation is, having worked in Gatwick, the majority of my conversations with local communities at night was noise. So at the moment we don't really have a noise problem at Castletown, although a few people have started to talk more and more about night flying. Encouraging an airline to fly later and later at night, you start to have bigger and bigger impacts on locals' health, particularly around night flying. So it's finding that fine balance between trying to get the EasyJet in before 11 o'clock. And again, we'll see that schedule change. It goes or it looks like that flight is an hour earlier. In actual fact, it's the Isle of Man is an hour earlier because the clocks go back. So that flight kind of stays the same.
So from this Sunday, when the clocks go back,
that flight will be an hour early because it stays the same. It's just we've shifted in time. And again, so we typically see in winter less of the stress. We talk to EasyJet on a regular basis. In fact, I'm over into Liverpool to talk to them on the 2nd of November. We talk to them about the Lake Gatwick. That Gatwick is a particularly lucrative route for them. Flying at that time fits into their schedules. They don't have any intention of changing that. They don't really have any intention of leaving the island. I'd say EasyJet are actually in a relatively good place. Naturally, they'd like lower fees, but that's probably because some of the issues that you're seeing in Gatwick. Now, to roll back to that flight that you spoke about on Sunday, that flight, so if it was sat on the ground. A lot of the ATC issues that you hear about recently, the pilot will say ATC, and unfortunately I think a lot of people on the island think, oh, ATC, it must mean the Isle of Man ATC. Gatwick has had quite a lot of issues with air traffic control, if anyone's been reading the news. Exactly the same issues as us. So since the pandemic, since Brexit, recruiting ATCOs, training ATCOs has taken longer than wanted, and also the training pipeline is a lot more. But we typically see far more issues with that Gatwick flight due to, should we say, Gatwick's air traffic control than our air traffic control. We've had a couple of instances where it's landed on time. It's been ready to leave at 9, but it's not left until about 10 to 11. And again, that's because it's picked up a slot, which is basically its ability to take a slot on Gatwick's runway has been delayed due to flow rates that have been imposed to try and control air traffic going in.
Okay, David?
Perhaps I could clarify, because the captain's comments were very specific, and the comments from the captain on the rescheduled flight yesterday afternoon were very specific, which is that EasyJet commercially had taken a decision that they would prefer to put 138 people, or whatever number actually needed accommodation, up in the Hilton in Gatwick. They were prepared to put the passengers sitting in the Isle of Man up in the Falcon Hotel. At the cost that would be to them, it would still be commercially preferable to paying the charges that the Isle of Man wish to impose. So I would remake my point, and they made a commercial decision on that. I would remake my point, which is that surely we have to provide this airline with rather more operational flexibility. I'm not talking 11 o'clock at night. We were buttoned down at 25 to 8. We were ready to go, and at quarter to 8 the flight was cancelled because he reckoned that he would not have sufficient time, in view of the curfew, his word, not mine, to get back out again. So I just find that a deplorable situation. There should be sufficient flexibility to give the guy 20 minutes.
Just one point, David. You said you've been flying for business reasons for many, many years. Yeah. When was it best?
We all look back longingly to the days of Manx Airlines, who provided a lot of operational flexibility. I personally have never experienced restrictions like this at all. I've flown all over the world. I've never experienced this. And I don't fly as frequently as I used to because I'm now retired. But I've been impacted twice by this Liverpool on the last, in the Gatwick one, the last 3 weeks. This started back in last February. I was looking at a flight to Dublin in February. And we were kept sitting on the ground for an hour whilst air traffic went for a cup of tea. I don't want to get into the legacy that you've inherited, Mr. Cobb, which is deplorable. I'm going to blame the previous airport director directly for that. There was no proper forward staff planning, succession planning, strategic planning at all. So you've inherited a difficult situation. I accept that. What we need now is a quick fix. And frankly, 20 minutes on Sunday night to have several hundred people not impacted the way they were would have been a very helpful quick fix.
Okay, all right. David, Gary Cobb?
And the only quick answer I'll do that is the fees that we charge for an extension are online and are publicly available in our fees.
Can you tell us?
From memory, and I double-checked, but this is purely from memory. I think the only extension fee that we would have charged that flight is £1,800. Okay. All right, David, we appreciate that, David, but we'd like to move on if possible. We've got other calls and other questions to get to, but I'm sure that's something we'll come back to. David, no, we've got John with us now. Hi, John. You're live with Gary Cobb.
Hi. I'd just like to comment or get some comments on the direct flights that I was on the 7th of October to Malaga. We were all on the flight waiting to go, and our luggage hadn't been put on. Because there were 3 flights in, and there wasn't enough ground staff. Similar coming back last Saturday. We landed, The EasyJet flight had come in, the Aer Lingus flight had come in, and again, not enough staff. We were sat on the plane 3/4 of an hour waiting for the steps to be brought to the door so we could get off. What's the situation?
Yeah, it's a very interesting one, this one, in that it's not commonly known, but the ground staff aren't employed by the airport. So ages ago, ground handling is the purview of an airline. So airports don't have anything. Even in Gatwick, you'll find 6 or 7 ground handling agents. In Inverness, you have one, Dalcross, and here we have Menzies. And to be fair to Menzies are really, really good. The airlines choose the level of resilience that they want, either A, within their schedule that they're flying, hence the reason why if there's a lot of aircraft bumped together, that's a resilience issue in the schedule, and then the resilience that they have in their ground staff. Naturally, the more resilience you have, the more cost it is to the airline, the more staff that they have to recruit, and so they accept the level of resilience that they have with the ground crew that they've got. That they will sit there and say, the schedule says this and therefore we will resource up to that schedule. If anything is off schedule, then they kind of accept that that's what that there's going to be an impact in terms of baggage, and there's going to be an impact in terms of steps. We talk to the airlines to sit there and try to get them to increase their resilience. But again, that's a conversation that we can only try to influence. It's kind of out of the airport's hands.
Because they're watching their margins. And again, it's very typical that an airport will get blamed for what happens on the ground rather than the airline that actually is accountable and responsible for it. In terms of what you'll typically see, airlines are wanting to prioritise their departures, so they'll always prioritise a departure, which is why bags or arrival bags is one of typically the last things that you'll see in. They've tried to make it so that aircraft's gone, and to be fair, that makes sense because at some point it's going to another airport and then another airport, so picking up delays is just going to ultimately potentially lead to a cancellation. But yeah, it's something that we talk to the airlines about regularly to try and get them to resource up to not just the schedule but to have some resilience in. However, on record, I will say that Menzies, who do the ground handling for all of the airlines on the island, do an incredible job. The team that work on the ramp do a really, really good job. They work really, really hard. So I think this is just a case of working with the airlines to put some resilience in rather than the actual teams on the ground not doing what they should do. So have Menzies got enough people?
So Menzies have enough people for the schedule that the airlines are going to fly. The issue is once that schedule is off, so if airlines pick up delays, which we regularly see, and then you have 2 or 3 aircraft coming in at the same time, they're only resourced up to cope with one. So then they'll triage, prioritise, and sometimes an airline will sit there and say, actually, that Manchester needs to go out first because that one's going to do another 2 sectors and that's quite important to us. So they'll prioritise that. And that will be an element of what you saw, unfortunately.
John, what did they say? What did they say on board to you?
The captain was, well, the incoming captain was brilliant. He because we were locked in virtually, and there was quite a few children on. He let all the children go and sit in the flight deck and have photographs taken just to ease the situation. But they just said that because there's another aircraft in that needed the steps, and the steps had been taken to that aircraft, was a complete lie, because I was sat next to the window and the steps that they brought to the aircraft was literally 10 feet away.
Okay, so do we have enough steps, Gary Cobb?
We have enough or the ground handler has enough steps for the schedule that they are flying.
Right. So it's obviously if there's an off in the schedule, if something slips in the schedule, that's where the pinch points come in.
Yeah, because ultimately the schedule that they will have teams that be able to. So if they plan to have 3 aircraft on the ground at any one time, they'll plan to have 3 teams. If a 4th aircraft comes, one of those aircraft is going to wait. Not necessarily the one that was last in would wait. It will be based upon where those aircraft are going. And again, that will be for the operations centre, so EasyJet or Emerald or Loganair. CI travels a little bit different in that that's a wet lease, typically a BA or a Sunwing, so they'll probably have less direct impact into Menzies. But the other operations centres for those airlines will be prioritising what the ground handler does on any given day.
Okay, all right, John, we appreciate that call. Thanks for that. And I just want to ask you quickly then, Gary Cobb, the airport can be a kind of lightning rod for criticism. It just seems to me that there's a lot of stuff you're not responsible for that you get the blame for.
Yeah, I think a good example that you typically see is if you use the steam packet in the harbours, say, a recent issue with one of the boats where one of the engines was down, so it was slow. People ask the question of the steam packet. If it's late coming out of Heysham, people ask the question of the steam packet. They don't go and ask the harbours team. We are just a port. The best way of describing how an airport works is we'll provide pretty much most of the infrastructure that you see and most of the airfield activities that have no real impact on you. So in terms of check-in, we provide the desk, but we don't man check-in. That's an airline, although they'll subcontract that through to a ground handler. In terms of operating all the baggage equipment that we've got, again, that's the ground handler and the airline that control all of that. We'll make sure that kit's fit, but we won't operate it. In terms of security, that is the airports. We outsource that, but that ultimately does sit with me. So queues and the equipment and slowing down is stuff that is directly in my control. The staff that call you to the gate, again, they work for the airline, subcontracted to Menzies, and then the staff that you see loading the aircraft, moving the aircraft around, pushing it back, talking on the headset, again, they all work for the airline. Staff that do work for me, air traffic control. So, and again, we've had some issues with that this summer, but that's within the purview of the airport. The airport fire and rescue service that hopefully we never have to need, but they are there. Again, work for us. Airfield ops, who you might see out there in terms of wildlife patrols running down the runway to make sure everything's okay. Again, they work for me. And in terms of the terminal, the ASDMs, the cleaners, so the duty managers is the ASDM, the cleaners and the information desk, they work for us. So in terms of the family of the airport, it's probably about a third to a half that work for the airport. The rest of it ultimately works for the airline, if not subcontracted out to a third party for them. Okay,
David, you're live with Gary Cobb.
Hi, Gary, and welcome to the Isle of Man. It does get easier and life will get better.
Thank you.
At the start. So the question I've got, one's a nice one and one's maybe a little harder one. Some years ago when I was in Parliament, 15, 16, there was a classification between the airport and government that the Isle of Man steam packet was owned by another private company, well out of government control, and it was deemed as an anti-competitive practice. It would give favouritism to the airport and to the airlines that were coming in on the seating capacity, how much you need, how much they want out of revenue. So now that the steam packet is owned by the arm's length company and indirectly the taxpayer of the Isle of Man, the people that live here now, is there still, or would there still be an anti-competitive practice if we reduced or had some bargains on the airlines, or you give them some incentives to come to the Isle of Man? And I'll run the second question to you. And are we still allowed any trips to the tower or the fire station?
Yep, so answer the first one. So in terms of incentives, so the policy that we work is open skies, and there's a lot of misconceptions over open skies. A lot of people think, it drives airlines coming in and they can do what they want to. And there is an element of it is a free and open marketplace, and anyone can fly here if they wanted to. But one of the prime drivers for that is it works normally best for the consumer in that they can lower their they have more affordable tickets. It's something that we talk about cross-governmentally quite a lot. Any airline that flies into Ronaldsway would love to kick the other airline off the route so that they can raise their prices, and we have seen that periodically where I think Loganair left one of the routes, and then I think EasyJet raised the prices, and then EasyJet have left a route, and then Loganair have raised the prices. And to be fair to them, they're normally raising their prices to the level that they probably should be. So EasyJet's model has no resilience in it, but it that's what makes it really, really low cost. Loganair are then competing with a low cost that doesn't reflect their cost base, so it's far lower than it actually costs for them to fly, and that's why Loganair can suffer. And you've seen it across the UK, where in direct competition, cost-wise, Loganair can't compete. In terms of product, they have a completely different product that is quite attractive to a lot of people. So, but in terms of offering incentives, that is allowed. It's carefully regulated in terms of it's got to be fair, transparent, but we can offer discounts but as long as you're not distorting the market, and I suppose that's the complicated bit of how to talk about distorting a market. So there's quite a lot of work in this area. It is quite complicated, but a new airline coming in would probably test it. Where we've got at the moment is the deals that we have with airlines. I think there's a lot of big misconception out there that we sit there and say we want a flight to Gatwick and we pay EasyJet for a flight to Gatwick. That isn't what happens. EasyJet come to us and say we're going to fly to Gatwick. We don't really have any levers that can stop them from doing that. All we have is a contract with EasyJet that charges them a fee per passenger, a fee for the security per passenger, and then normally a fee for what we class as PRMs, or that's passengers with reduced mobility. So needing like the ambi lift or a wheelchair access and stuff like that. In terms of when they fly, we don't sit there and say you need to fly this many times. We'll work with the airlines to try and get better routes and try and get the frequency that we want, and we have had some new routes coming in and hopefully some new ones in the offing in the next year or so. But we don't have as much control, I think, as people want. In terms of visits to the Tower and Fire, absolutely. We do quite enjoy that. We have a very proud team. I think they take an unfair kicking sometimes on social media. They love to show what they're doing. We have to be careful. There are restricted places, as you would imagine, with air traffic control, and it is a live operational environment. But if people are wanting a trip to the Tower, what I'd recommend is either dropping me a line or others, and then if there's enough demand, we'll do an open day. If it's just one or two people, happy to show people around.
Okay, thanks, David.
Nice to see it, bye.
Good to hear from you. Let me just reiterate this again and just run this by us again. I'll give you the question. A lady on a Manchester flight landed at the same time as two other flights, one set of baggage handlers on duty, so they could unload only one set of bags at a time, which meant they waited for 45 minutes after a 28-minute flight. So what's the sanction for this? And just the frustration of the customer has to go somewhere, and obviously if you're not responsible for it, where can that go?
And I suppose it's ultimately the expectation. So EasyJet won't sit there and go, I've got a set of criteria for the Isle of Man. EasyJet will have a criteria for baggage. In Gatwick, I think their criteria for baggage was about an hour. And that was the level where they started to then have some sanctions, or it started to count against them. We've never really got to the point where that happens frequently enough that those sanctions are being triggered, or we can speak to the regulator, or we can speak about putting some KPIs in. And again, it would only be very loosely applied, because ultimately the contract between the passenger is with the airline. So that contract is to fly to this place and to get their bags. It's not really for me to tell EasyJet what timing their baggage should be. Right. As a low-cost carrier, they minimise their costs, so you know that in terms of you are making some sacrifice in terms of, because you're getting a really, really good price. In terms of a Loganair, they may stipulate a separate deal onto their ground handler, but ultimately it's between the airline and the ground handler what they deem to be an acceptable limit for the bags, because ultimately that's the contract that they have with their passenger of what is acceptable. And I don't know whether it's slightly different for each of the airlines here at Ronaldsway. I think it's probably the same, because it's normally pretty good.
Live with Gary Cobb today on Mannin Line. Gary is Director of Ronaldsway Airport, and lots more questions to come to, including what the former ministers had to say.
Quayside Tyre and Service Centre is now an agent for Motability vehicles. So when you need tyres for your Motability car, call into Quayside and they'll be happy to assist with excellent friendly service and great prices. Find all the latest offers on Facebook. Call into Quayside or call 664417.
South Quay Douglas, don't delay, have safer tyres today. Quayside.
There's a new way to Subway with 2 fantastic menus. Which will you go for? The all-new Subway series with 15 irresistible creations like the Big Bombay Sub, Great Goddess Salad, Emperor Wrap and Big Cheesesteak Sub Melt. Or create your own. You pick the ingredients you want and build your own sub, salad or wrap the way you want it. There's a great mix of healthy and indulgent menu items available from Subway and ShopRite, Peel and Port Erin.
When you save a little money, it means a lot these days. If you're looking for bathrooms and tiles, you'll always find something new in store at Pacesetter. For surprisingly affordable prices and excellent choice, search online for Pacesetter Douglas. Or better still, visit the Pacesetter Bathroom and Tile Showroom on Harris Terrace and see the new styles in store.
You can get the best of everything, where the price is twice as nice.
At Isle of Man Energy, we're excited to offer our customers the Alpha E-Tech efficient hybrid gas boiler and heat pump combination. This state-of-the-art hybrid boiler causes minimal disruption to your existing heating system, making it simple to upgrade. Priced from just £65 a month and with 6-year warranty as standard, which can be extended to 10 years, what are you waiting for? Register for a free consultation at isleofmanenergy.im.
Get ready for another winning weekend on Manx Radio.
And this weekend, a staycation package at Ramsey Park Hotel could be yours. This includes an overnight stay, dinner and live entertainment from Mamma Mia tribute The Dynamos, all happening on Saturday the 6th of January.
Visit manxradio.com and answer the competition question for your chance to win. You can enter as many times as you like.
Then make sure you join us for Manx Radio Breakfast on Monday morning, when you'll find out if you're the lucky winner.
Make this your winning weekend with your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And Gary Cobb's here as well. The Honourable Member for Douglas Central, Mr Thomas, is moving in Tynwald next month. That the Department for Enterprise should publish immediately the final report of the Air Services review that it commissioned. Have you seen the report?
So yes, I saw the report. The report was commissioned well before I joined. I can't remember when. I think it was either just after the pandemic or maybe a bit before. My memory's a little bit loose in terms of, and that document basically has a look at the policy framework for air connectivity on the Isle of Man. So closed skies, open skies, what levers are available, what routes are core, what's needed. Again, Mr Thomas, very familiar with the document, and thought what was in it was very important. So I would guess he's just wanting to put that out into the public domain. But it is a Department for Enterprise document.
Okay, we heard from... just tell me, which department does the airport come under?
So airport is DOI.
DOI, okay. We heard David earlier on talking about the business community, and obviously the Isle of Man is aiming forward with the business community, getting more people to work, obviously getting more revenue in, and to place ourselves as an international business centre. Obviously connectivity is absolutely vital. I mean, do you have any private thoughts, any public thoughts about what the government needs to do to get Ronaldsway into gear to face the future?
So again, there's two parts to that, some within the control of government, some without. So in terms of within the control of government, we're in the process of finalising the master plan. It's in a draft that will require investment in an airport. I think investment in Ronaldsway is lower than probably against many of its peers, but without the budget you can't spend the money. It's pretty clear financial directives placed upon civil servants. In terms of stuff outside of government, I suppose some of this goes into destinations. So at the moment we have 5 flights, depending on the time and the day, to London. People talk about that the Gatwick was unreliable, but you could still fly to London City and London Heathrow. People talk about then, they're more expensive, but that's kind of some of the equation that you need to have in terms of, do I do the Late Gatwick or do I go to Heathrow? I fly the Late Gatwick. I used to live in Gatwick, East Grinstead. Some of my family live on the south coast, so I will fly relatively frequently on that flight. I think I've spoken to several passengers who questioned whether I ever would fly on it, and I had that conversation with them. But again, if it's an important meeting that's in London, then I'll go to I'll probably fly to Heathrow. Same with the Northwest. You have Logan Air and you have EasyJet. I think some of our issues come from 2 airlines competing on routes that are critically important to the island. My personal view is you do need both, although that is a view that evolves over time, and there's lots of challenge and lots of discussions in government about, but I think that's probably the best for the passenger. However, they're both in competition, and the pie's probably just not big enough for both of them. So again, you come to if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And I think there are several routes which we occasionally put out of. The Bristol was like that. So the EasyJet Bristol was a use it or lose it. It was under review by EasyJet. Those numbers are getting better, but again, it's always on that watch list. Belfast City from Emerald, again, needs people to use it. So use it. And again, we've secured that into the new year, but it'll be under review. And then in terms of EasyJet have seen that a softening of a demand from Manchester over the autumn winter, and so have pruned some of their schedule to take that into account. And as a commercial organisation, they're here to make money, and they will fly when they think there is the passenger base for it. But again, we have Logan Air that can pick up the slack. So,
how much money do you think's got to be spent on Ronaldsway, and what is it that would smarten Ronaldsway up and take it forward for the rest of the 21st century?
So a tough question to answer, because ultimately it depends on what type of airport you want. People talk about the ILS, so
the instrument landing.
The instrument landing system. Yeah, sorry, I'll probably use quite a lot of jargon in a minute, so stop me. So the instrument landing system, you see quite a lot on social media, probably pilot driven, about the approach lights. And yes, the approach lights are basic and affect the visibility minima that instrument landing system has. You could fix those approach lights. That would cost a hell of a lot of money because there's a sea shelf there. You could do an instrument landing system category 2, so an ILS level 2. But again, in terms of the cost of that would be relatively high, less than fixing your approach lights, and the timing of that would depend on the cost. If you did it in the middle of a runway resurfacing, it'd be a lot less to add that into it. If you were to do it on its own, it would cost a lot more. But then you have to sit there and say that's probably going to be about 10 to 12 million pounds, and it's probably going to save you about 8 to 10 fog days a year. Is that worth the money when government could spend it? So it's very easy as the airport director to want more money, and ultimately I'd love to have much more money. There's a lot of stuff that we could buy it on, but you do have to have some sympathy with Treasury, who are sit there going, I'm going to compare that against something at the hospital, something with a new school, something. And so it needs to be something that's holistically looked at. In terms of tidying the place up, again, that's probably the last thing that I'd spend the money on. There's a lot more critical stuff. You could have a look at passenger experience. That's something that we'd look at more. So there is a relatively easy way to double the departure lounge space by moving security, and that would create a lot more space for when those flights peak in. You can have a look at operational resilience, so putting what are basically global navigation satellite system area navigation, so GNSS nav approaches, and again that would give us some resilience in terms of medical flights at night, which is something that I talk to Manx Care about. There's a lot of things that you could spend a lot of money on that you don't necessarily need to, so it does need an element of what type of airport do we want to be, and then we can spend accordingly. And hopefully the master plan, which we'll hope to publish at some point soon, we have a draft, but it is a really complicated document and we only have so much time to be available to do it. So again, that's slower than I'd like it to be, but that will form a basis for conversation, I think.
Okay, live with Gary Cobb, Airport Director at the moment, and from the answer phone.
Hi Andy, my name is Roger. It's just a question for today's guest, the Director of the airport, please. I'd like to ask him the question, and it's in relation to taxis, or should I say lack of taxis, at the airport to meet incoming flights. Just recently, once again, my wife and I returned from holiday, come outside with our suitcases, and there's no taxis in the taxi rank. We waited for 20 minutes plus, along with some other visitors to the island. As a last resort, we went into the airport to the customer service desk and asked for contact details. We were given a sheet of paper with a whole list of local telephone numbers, and none of them were available. The phones either rang out, nothing available. In fact, the last person said, "Can't come now. I'm having my tea." This was 5 o'clock on a Saturday. What we did, because we know the ropes, we got a bus into Douglas, which wasn't easy with suitcases. However, we got in, got the taxi from Victoria Street, explained our plight to the taxi driver, and his comment was, "Well, you've got no chance on a Saturday, that they're all in Douglas where the money is." So the bottom line is, are you providing a service Can you ensure that taxis are there for incoming flights or not? At the moment, it's just potluck and it's a disgrace. Thank you very much. One last thing, I'm sure you'll give a politician-type answer, but again, just tell us, are you providing, can you guarantee a taxi is there for incoming flights or not? Thank you.
So in simple answers, no. Taxis don't really fall under my jurisdiction. Absolutely. Would we like taxis there? Would we work with taxi companies to try and encourage them? Yes. I would probably recommend pre-booking taxis whenever I fly across. If I want a taxi, it's pre-booked. No matter what airport I fly to, that's pretty much the standard way of doing it. And we are incredibly lucky here on the Isle of Man with the bus service that we've got. I think they do a really good job, and it's very, very frequent compared to most other airports. So again, I think we have plenty of different surface access.
And this comes down to expectations.
Yeah.
And obviously we can often look back and think things were better than they used to be, but most people, if you go back 10, 15 years, can remember lines and lines of taxis there. So is it reasonable now to expect there won't be taxis at the airport? Yeah,
I think you have taxi companies that are, again, coming out of COVID, have a lack of staff and their ability to be able to flex up to demand. And it's probably an area to do. I'd sit there and say that taxis on the island probably sit outside the jurisdiction of the airport director. Yeah. Whilst we are a key user of them, we're not the only user. So I would probably argue that this is something that other people could look at, but ultimately the private sector needs to go in. If there's enough demand for people using a taxi, then more taxi firms will spring out of the water and more people will use them. But we have other options that are quite cheap, and it's very, very cheap to use bus vanning into Douglas. Again, I've used it several times myself. So, and if you drive your own car, come and park at the car park.
Okay, I think we've got a taxi. Hello, sir, you're a taxi driver. What's your name?
Les.
Oh, Les, what do you have to say?
Well, the last gentleman, I mean, unfortunately, there's airplanes coming in, one after the other. We can never service planes that there's 3 or 4 coming in all within half an hour. It's ridiculous that I work a lot of hours down there, and I'm always down there. I mean, it's ridiculous. If we can space them out, then we've got a chance. But we do have quite a few taxis continuously down there. And for him to say that, it's unfair.
Okay, so
we can't even get on the rank because people are parking on the taxi ranks that we can't even get to the taxi rank.
Okay, how many taxis can park there, Les?
Well, you've got the 4 right outside, then you've got the pre-booked, which you could probably get 20 on, and then you've got the overflow up the top, which is usually full of people coming to pick people up. And we cannot get there because there's nobody that can say to them, move or you're going to get booked.
Okay, so is the best thing to do then for people, if they want a taxi, to pre-book it before they get back?
Well, yes, but I mean, there are taxis. We do long hours. We're there first thing in the morning and to late at night, and we do our best.
Okay, all right, Les, we appreciate that.
Let's to sit there and say, yeah, absolutely, we see taxis there quite a lot. I think it's just that, unfortunately, when you have EasyJets of 175 passengers on a plane and several of them coming at once, that peak demand, but then you would never be able to sustain that level of taxis being required. So I think that the taxi guys do a good job. In terms of outside the terminal is an area of concern. So from a safety viewpoint, having cars so freely able to drive outside that terminal is problematic. No other UK airport, they have ASIAD guidelines that wouldn't allow that. We've never implemented here. And also being able to control what goes in there in terms of taxis and pre-booked. So again, that's something that we'd probably propose looking at in the master plan, just to stop the free-for-all that you see, especially when people can park in the car park for 30 minutes free, and it is probably only a 2-minute walk.
OK, all right, 10 to 1 live with Gary Cobb from the airport now.
She found Miss Emily French murdered. The room in disorder, a window smashed.
Did you kill Emily French?
The Service Players present one of Agatha Christie's finest thrillers, Witness for the Prosecution, at the Gaiety Theatre on the 9th to the 11th of November.
It's not true, I tell you. It's not true!
With twists and turns to the last stunning moment, for a truly immersive experience, get VIP tickets and join the cast as a juror and watch the whole gripping drama from the stage. Witness for the Prosecution. Go to villagaiety.com for tickets.
A big thank you to your workmen. They've done a very good job. My property looks like new again. Thank you, EPS.
We're delighted with the house. Your employees obviously take great pride in their work.
The work was done promptly, professionally and considerately.
We're delighted.
EPS, transforming properties island-wide with the revolutionary Protex wall covering system, guaranteed for 10 years. Book now for spring 2024 to get 10% off. Visit eps.company for details.
A good job. Well done.
Walk through the Northern Lights into a land of ice and snow at Ramsey Garden Centre. Indoor and outdoor lights, trees, decorations and much more. Come down for our festive launch this Wednesday and see.
Crossroads Isle of Man, putting carers first.
Crossroads have been providing services to local carers and people with care needs for over 30 years. As the leading provider of support for carers on the island, our services are all about improving the lives of carers and giving them a break from caring. Visit crossroadsiom.org for more information.
Crossroads Isle of Man, putting carers first.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And Gary Cobb is here from the airport. Julian's on. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy, and hi, Gary.
Hi, Julian.
Hiya. A couple of questions for you. I noticed that the Channel Islands airline, Aurigny, who are sort of what Manx Airlines used to be for us, I noticed that the ATR aircraft that they've ordered recently are being equipped with a clear vision enhanced flight vision system, which allows them to fly in fog to a much lower height and minima. And they reckon that they've dropped their delays by a half in foggy conditions. I know this is up to the airline in some ways, but is there any way that that could be applied to the island? Because it seems quite a good system to have.
Yeah, so it's fog and ILS is a very complicated subject. So in terms of, you have what the airport can offer and you have what the aircraft can do. So on the ground, we will provide an instrument landing system, which is typically a localizer, which beams out two beams, where it tells you where the centre line is, a 3.5, in our case, degree glide slope, DME, which is almost just like a beacon in the middle of the airfield that they can ping on to. And then we're in the process of commissioning instrument runway visual range, so an IRVR, which gives you a visual range. Ultimately that will give a pilot information, and then depending on their aircraft type and their company's operating procedures, they will have a visibility minima that they can go down to. EasyJet can go down to a Cat 3B, which is what Gatwick has, so that's like a 50-foot decision height. So in essence, they're almost touching down. It's not automatic, but at 50 feet, they're not going to be doing very much different. I think Loganair have just done a safety case to be able to do a Cat 2 ILS. But again, at the moment, we only have a Cat 1 ILS. Now, several people sit there and go, oh, you've just spent a load of money on a new instrument landing system, you've wasted your money. Our instrument landing system, per se, actually can do Cat 2. The problem is that you need a series of lights inside the runway, lights outside of the runway system, and then safeguarding and other bits that would enable the aircraft to be able to go down to Cat 2. So we can do Cat 2. That's something that we'll have a look in the master plan. Whether that's something that the government want to fund is a different matter, but that will rely on those aircraft having that ability to be able to go down to Cat 2. I'm not 100% certain of the system you're talking about, whether that can go down lower, but with an ATR it's probably only able to go down to Cat 2, although you can have lower than Cat 1, which is a a fudge which sits somewhere between the two.
Okay, all right, Julian, thanks. We've got to dash on. I just want a couple more things to get in, and this is, dear Andy, could you ask Gary who runs the airport website? Who actually updates it when there's an issue? On Sunday evening, we had a delay following the cancellation to the Gatwick Ronaldsway flight. The Gatwick website had the information at 8:30. Ronaldsway's website showed it as being delayed at 11:30 that night. Who does the website?
So website is us. Again, website is something that I'd love to spend money on. So in all the other airports have the ability for their flight plans in their tower, which again is a project that we'd like to do, to be automated. So for us, that would be moving from Copperchase to a better FDMS, which bizarrely is the thing that failed for NATS so recently across. That can then plug directly into the website and update the website automatically. At the moment, we don't have the budget to be able to do that, so our website is basically updated whenever the airline sends information to the ground handler then updating the website when they're able to. It's a relatively easy fix. It's probably going to cost about £1 million, but it is an easy fix. And again, it's the where do you spend your money and what do you focus on. I'd love to be able to do a website, and in fact we're doing a revamp of the website, but again, getting the funding for that has proven tough, especially in the tough financial conditions we find ourselves in. But again, that won't fix that issue of automatic updating. We'll have to do several things in tower to enable that to happen.
Okay, in 30 seconds, at the moment the airport's owned by the government. Do you think it'd be better privately owned? Would it be better run?
So my personal opinion is arm's length airports work better. The UK have a policy in place that any airport with more than £1 million revenue has to be arm's length. I think that gives you the freedom to be able to move more nimbly than I currently have at the moment.
Okay. Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it. Now we know what isn't Gary Cobb's responsibility, and it's certainly not taxes. We're back with an open line tomorrow. If you want to follow up on anything that's been said tomorrow, by all means do get in touch. And thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones today.
WINT